Welcome to the Grazing Along series of Forage Nexus initiative to celebrate the National Forage Week. I am Marcelo Valau, Forage Extension Specialist at the University of Florida.
I'm Lilian Silva, I'm the Forage Specialist for Clemson University.
And I am Bruno Pedreira, the Forage Specialist with the University of Tennessee.
So the National Forage Week is an effort from the American Forage and Grassland Council to raise awareness to the importance and impact of forages. And to help us celebrate this important ecosystem, we brought together a distinguished group of colleagues to share some different perspectives on the big picture of forage production systems and discuss how forages and grazing will be integral part of the future of sustainable agriculture. Today, our guest is Dr. Ann Blount, and I have the pleasure to introduce her. Dr. Blount is a professor and forage breeder at the University of Florida, and she holds degrees from Texas A&M University and the University of Florida in crop science and plant breeding, and has been working with us for over 30 years. Her research focuses on the physiological aspects of forage production and improving disease resistance in forage cultivars. Throughout her career, she has over 76 cultivars or germplasms released, developed, or co-developed. And also, Dr. Blount is an extremely good extension specialist from whom I have the pleasure to learn a lot. She has been my mentor since I started here at UF. Among many other achievements, Dr. Blount was selected Woman of the Year in Agriculture by the Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services in 2019. Dr. Blount, welcome to Forage Nexus.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. To start our conversation, can you share a little bit of your journey here to become a forage breeder and how your career evolved over the years?
Sure. I grew up in the Caribbean. I'm actually a product of the American Virgin Islands, St. Croix. And Marcelo might find this interesting. The gentleman who directed me to go into agronomy when I was sure I wanted to be a veterinarian was the gentleman who brought in limpo grass from Africa. So many years ago, I worked very closely with the Department of Agriculture, and there was folks who were from the federal government there, and they directed me to go into agronomy, which I had never heard of, and study crop and fiber science, and then come back to the Virgin Islands to work as the local agronomist. Jack Oakes is the person that I'm talking about, who brought Hamarthria from Africa to the United States as a promising forage back when I was about 15, 16 years old, and helped direct me towards college. So did another gentleman that many folks in the agricultural sector know, Tony Sotomayor from University of Puerto Rico, who at one point was working at University of Florida. Both of them directed me to go into forages and to work in the subtropical area of research. So to them, I'm extremely grateful. And I find it very funny that I've come full circle in my career and ended up working with the same crops that they introduced me to back when I was just a teenager in St. Croix.
That's great. That's great. Great to learn a little bit from you, Dr. Blount. I would say that despite the availability of the numerous species and varieties, we still living in a kind of monoculture systems in the forage world, right? Marcelo just mentioned you have more than 60 cultivars or varieties that you help us to release in the last few years. I would like to see more that we are, in our forage livestock systems right now. What do you see as the biggest challenge in the forage breeding programs to increase forage diversity?
Okay, probably one of the biggest challenges is learning what forages work well together so we move away from a monoculture system. We have a tendency in forages to look for low input type systems, very little fertilizer, certainly few pesticides, if any, no irrigation. So trying to figure out what crops work well together in the forage system, compatible, that maybe give more stability and longer length to the forage grazing period. So let me remind everybody that when the cow grazes, It is a lot less expensive than harvesting and conserving any kind of forage. So letting the cow do the work is the way we ought to be thinking, or letting any livestock, because over the course of my career, it has not just been cattle. It's been everything from equine, small ruminants. We even work with elephants and some of the larger wildlife populations around the world. So looking at integrated systems that are maybe well suited to work together non-competitively, or at least competitively enough that they stay in the mixed sward, and then looking at the length of time of availability, what systems you could do to complement each other to sort of broaden that forage availability season across the year. We always talk about year-round forages, but not any one forage can do that. So, by looking at a system of forages, I think that's probably one of the best approaches. And then, of course, reaching out in extension, which, even though I'm a plant breeder, I spend a lot of time working in extension, is adoption. How do you get the end user, the producer, the wildlife person, to integrate that knowledge and actually plant those plants and look at a longer picture of time rather than just the short season, which most people seem to concentrate on. So extension, uh, it's how do you transfer the idea of what you're developing to actually utilization in the field, and that's always been the hardest challenge: adoption. And you do that through extension.
Sure, and on that point, so Marcelo mentioned that you have a vast experience, and you were able to really build a strong extension program there in Florida. So throughout your career, you worked with several of the organizations, the dairy, cattlemen's, and you continue to work with a lot of them still, even now on your current position as an emeritus professor. And and you just mentioned as well, like the adoption part. That's how we would be able to really emphasize and bridge the information from the forage breeding programs to the producers. So through your experience, what would be some of the tips, some of the advice that you would give to this audience that will encompass a lot of forage people as well, forage educators? What would be some of the advice that you would give for people trying to really work on transferring that knowledge and to even really work on increasing sustainability on forage livestock systems on operations?
Okay, good question, Lillian. So I can now look back and see that it's broader than the ability to develop excellent varieties and even the extension outreach, because there's a lot of other entities involved in the success of any type of product. It doesn't even matter if it's agricultural or not, but in this case, forages. So we have in the United States the NRCS, a government entity that actually gives cost share. So does Department of Agriculture to help improve adoption. So how many of us reach out to NRCS at a national level or at a state level to help promote what we're doing? So there's this whole group of NRCS agents out there, Department of Agricultural agents out there that need to be part of the engagement. Then, besides that, any, particularly with forages, but any crop, if you don't have good marketing behind what you develop, you can have created the very best variety that might be adapted over a broad range of environments, but it's not going to go anywhere unless you have a commercial entity behind you. And no offense to the university system, we're not the best at marketing our own varieties. Public varieties, as much as I'd like to say public varieties, are a great approach to releasing cultivars to the public without, a royalty stream or extra added costs. A lot of times, without a company behind it to market it, or several companies behind it to market it, those varieties don't go anywhere. So I'm what I think we need to do is look at a broader picture of an alliance or a coalition between departments of ag and NRCS. By the way, the plant materials centers are part of NRCS in the United States system, where they do a lot of work on collecting germplasm that's local, or testing new concepts. Like right now, a big plant materials center across the United States, a big push is on cover cropping. So, how do you get everybody on the same page? We, even for forages, have the Southern Cover Crop Council. There's a National Cover Crop Council. A lot of people who are not necessarily directly engaged with the research or the extension activities at a university level, or maybe a lot of them aren't even engaged with NRCS, who offers the cost share, or other federal agencies like Department of Ag. So somehow we've got to get everybody together. And not everyone belongs to American Society of Agronomy or Grazing Lands Coalition or American Forage and Grasslands. We've got to merge all these entities. And if I had to say the one thing I'm sorry I did not take in college, besides all the plant pathology and nematology and entomology, which were important, is marketing. I think we are not very good at marketing ourselves. And, as a university professor who's developed a lot of varieties, that would be my weakest point, is how do you get out there and market something that's excellent? And part of it is I don't really understand how the seed industry or a lot of the private sector function. I'm getting that experience now because I work with the Southern Seed Commission. I work on a lot of seed certification, so I'm learning more about the industry, but we don't usually train our students in that aspect in college. And so we produce students and researchers, county extension agents, who really don't see the interconnection between all these entities. And I think that's been a problem for maybe a cohesiveness across the United States. And actually, now we're very international. A lot of seed companies sell forages or any kind of crops or all our commodities on an international basis. So it's really even bigger picture than what I've dealt with in my career, looking out across partnerships on a global level.
No, that's great. So thinking about your program, or someone developing a program nowadays, specifically in forages and considering forages as a pathway for more sustainable agriculture, how would you see this breeding program moving forward and targeting, and then how that bleeds into the extension side, focusing on um, the future of sustainable agriculture?
Okay. And good and important question. So I don't think what I would recommend is a change in the approach. We know that we are looking at very similar aspects in forage breeding that I looked at beginning my career 30 years ago. And actually, I've been in plant breeding for 50 years, if you count that I went to Texas A&M and worked in plant breeding at 17. So it's 50 years now. So I don't think our objectives have changed. We know that in the case of forages, we're looking at low input systems, low cost in seed or vegetative material. Uh, Typically, as I mentioned earlier, producers do not use very many pesticides, that's herbicides or insect disease control. Very rarely do they use irrigation except in the high end commodity crops like alfalfa production or dairy silage, corn silage. Those are more high end. But if you look at the majority of forage folks are fairly low input. And so breeders and foragers, I think, have always understood we need to breed and develop under low